He was able to be confident in Jesus, who has the authority to forgive him, in the only one who has the power to absolve him of his sin. Remember me, he asks Jesus. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. The thief looks upon Jesus as one with the power and the authority and the status to be able to absolve and forgive. This Sunday is called Christ the King Sunday, or the Reign of Christ, Sunday before Advent. Words, of course, of royalty and grandeur and power and stateliness surround the name of Jesus when we say the reign of Christ, or Christ the King, the ruler. We might think that the scriptures today ought to be chock full of images of pomp and majesty and opulence, accentuating the supernatural divine clout of Jesus and the Godhead. And yet today we have this Luke passage appointed for this Sunday, this passage of the time of Jesus' death on the cross, with two criminals beside him. Hardly a place where one would expect to find a king. A place of unspeakable disgust and horror. As far from a gold-trimmed throne chamber as can be. There is Jesus on the cross, stripped of all pomp and circumstance, of all show, of all public demonstrations of power, of all wealth, and even of the last shred of human dignity. How can this Jesus be a king? Well, the thief knew it. He was able to see the one and only way that Jesus could and always be able to exercise his royal prerogative. That is, to pardon, to offer a clean bill, that clean slate, the power to forgive. Every other outward and superficial trapping of royalty is out of the window, stripped away, except this one, his power to pardon. His power to pardon even the ungodly, the undeserving so-called. To pardon those who are broken and who know it. Jesus is king for only one reason, and that is he alone has this authority to offer pardon. There's an old song. It was popular in the 1970s, I'm told. I was asking about this song. It's called Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around an Old Tree. And I read about it. What's this? And I asked somebody, oh, it was popular in the 70s. And I forget the musician. Anyway, you might know. But I was only a small boy back in the 70s. But anyways, I was intrigued to read about this story. You know that this is a song about a prisoner who had been released from jail, okay? But he wasn't sure that his wife would still love him or welcome him home. So he wrote a letter to his spouse. He said in it, tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree and I'll know I'm welcome home when I see it. But if it's not there, I'll just go along, move along, I'll keep going. Well, the ex-convict was in the bus riding in front of his house and looks up and what does he see? Not one, but hundreds of yellow ribbons tied around this oak tree. And I thought, wow, this song tells me something about the superabundance of our God, who is all too eager and all too willing to overflow in offering pardon and forgiveness. This is our God who just wishes to embrace us in compassionate and forgiving love, showering us with assurances of pardon. It tells of that deep joy that comes in knowing that despite confessing our brokenness and where we are wounded and vulnerable, God nevertheless is ready, always ready to receive us and to embrace us and to offer that healing start, that new beginning. And so, having exercised his royal prerogative, having touched and warmed our hearts with forgiving love, we begin that process of change and transformation. And toward others, we begin to gain a better understanding and sensitivity and are more apt to be forgiven when otherwise before perhaps we would not. We begin to identify more closely with others in their struggle and in their need. God's forgiveness is a power so often underestimated and so often understated. Because God's forgiveness has the power to change life. And it was so for Oscar Romero. Oscar Romero had it all, really. He was a 59-year-old bishop in the Roman Catholic Church, serving in El Salvador in the 1970s. And he was a dignified ecclesiastic, at the pinnacle of church power, a man of circumspection, a man of diplomacy and loyalty and orthodoxy, a man who enjoyed the esteem of Rome and his fellow bishops. He was a man who was well received by the Salvadoran elite. Oscar Romero was a person of kingly proportions, enjoying a status of respectability, almost like royalty. But something changed his life dramatically, forever. It was an encounter with the forgiving love of God. He was leading a funeral mass one day, filling in for a parish priest who wasn't there. So as bishop, he was there leading this funeral service, this funeral mass. And suddenly, he became acutely aware, just out of the blue, he became acutely aware of God's presence in the faces of his congregation. He became suddenly very conscious that God was in his midst, but located in the ordinary people in the congregation, present in and among the poor, the impoverished folks in that congregation. And from then on, he began to identify himself closer to the congregation, to the ordinary folks in their ordinary struggles. And in the process, divesting himself from status and privilege. He became, as you may know, a strong voice for the powerless in El Salvador, injecting more compassion and understanding and fairness and justice in El Salvador society until he was murdered in 1980 by the police. Romero biographers make this telling statement. They say, who else but God could be the source of such a change in him? From here to here. Who else but God could change a man like